Kirk, looking at some of the content that you've put out as we were getting ready for the show, I thought of a quote that I really want your take on, because I've really seen this more reflected as, like, when it first came out, I was like, but I've seen more reflection society. So I want your take on this quote. Here's the quote. We're the middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no great war, no great depression. Our great war is a spiritual war. Our great depression is our lives. We've all been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars, but we won't. We're slowly learning that fact, and we're very, very pissed off. Now, for all you guys, movie nerds, that's from Fight Club. Kirk, the first time I ever heard that, I was like, that may be a little... Honestly, I read it the other day. It's like, that's really kind of touching a nerve. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, it's probably a timeless challenge, but it does remind me a lot of the problem of purpose that men are facing today. That problem of purpose, for those that haven't heard, is that traditionally men's roles were protector, provider, procreator. But protector, at least in the Western world, as threats have been declining, right? You can walk down the street and a tiger is not going to attack you. We're more civilized. That's becoming less and less important. There are times for it, but just less frequent. Provider is becoming less frequent. We can talk about this a little bit later, but in 22 of the biggest cities in America right now, between the ages of 16 and 29, women are earning more than men for the same job and same time commitment and same age. So provider is becoming less relevant. In fact, one generation further still, and we might see that the wage gap, which has now become more of the parenting gap, that might actually close off entirely because women are having children later as well. And then the procreator piece, well, that's pretty obvious, but for the most part, men were never needed for that. And now scientifically, you can actually reproduce pretty much without them being involved at all. And so men with this traditionally defined role of protector, provider, procreator are questioning where they fit. And so this middle men that you were quoting, right? Where do we fit in this world? Where's the purpose? Where do I go to? Well, interestingly, University of North Carolina did a study, and they found that basically the time spent on video games for the average man has doubled from 2005 to 2015. And it looks set to double again from 2015 to 2025. Some people are spending 10 hours a day. Some people are spending 5. But either way, on average, that number is doubling. Why? Well, it's because there's a reality in the real world and there's a reality in the video game. And sometimes that reality in the video game is more attractive than the reality we see here. Here, you might not be attracting the girls you want. You might not be earning what you want. You might not have the physical stats you want. But in the video game, you can see results quite quickly. You can jump 3 times your height. You can link up with your friends all over the world online, feel like you have a global presence. And so sometimes, and at least it's what they hypothesized, it's easier to go to a fake world to find some sort of salience in your life than it is to face the reality of the real one. And that is kind of an apt summary when it comes to Fight Club specifically.
Yeah, Fight Club. It's funny because I'm in the age group that it came out right at a prime time for me. But for years, I was like, I don't see, like, I just didn't see the appeal of the movie. It had a very cult following. And as I've gotten older, it's like, I'm starting to get it a little bit more. Maybe I was a little younger than I thought that movie was aimed at when I first watched it. But I read it the other day and I was going through getting ready for this. It's like, man, I know a lot of young men right now who like fall into this category. Minus the whole Great War thing. I think when Club came out, we were actually at more of a time of peace than we have been the last several years, of course. But it's just like, man, I know so many young men who are just falling into this category of, and it is that, and I don't want to call them aimless and shiftless, all right, because that's a derogatory idea. But sure, we've lost track of purpose. And as someone who used to, I had a gaming addiction issue before gaming addiction was considered a legitimate thing. I threw away 3 years of my life. Like I actually clicked out time played over 3 years of my life on that game over the course of more like 8.5 or 9 years. But in that time, like total time played over 3 years of my life in that game, I was like, and it was.
Well, now I have to ask, what game was that?
I was an early adopter. I started World of Warcraft a month after it came out, and I played
Amazing.
through Mists of Pandaria expansion. But yeah, no, I spent years of my life. I started playing it to connect with some young people I was working with at the time, and it was that absolute. I did not feel like I was accomplishing anything in my real life of note. I was going to work. I was doing the thing. Yay, I got the job. I got the house. I got the family. But it was like, there's got to be more to life than this. And in Azeroth, like I was pushing something.
Sure. Yeah, you were growing yourself. Yeah, for me it was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. I was in that realm, and I think I lost like 10th and 11th grade to just Call of Duty. Like my ultimate goal at that point was to get into paid competitions where, for whatever reason, I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, to get paid to play video games. And I realized, as life began to suffer, I'm like, what do I want to be the outcome of this? Do I want, after, let's just say, a couple of years of my life, I said to myself, if I take every moment that I play a video game and I was to say, okay, every time I'm going to play a video game for an hour, instead of that, I will work out or I'll read a book. And I did some calcs, and I would finish something. It was something like I'd finish like 32 books a year or something ridiculous like that. I was like, what, at the end of the year, do I want to look back and say I did, say I accomplished, or who's just the person that I want to be? Is it the reader who has all this immense knowledge, or is it the guy that prestiged 4 times on COD, right? And the answer was never prestiged on that. And the trick is, we've got this battle in our mind, which is where we want to pursue pleasure, but we also want to pursue our oughts, meaning who should we be? What ought we to do? And this is what I call the mental challenge of men. I want to do something, but I know I should do another thing. I get home from the gym and I know I should go to the gym, and I do want to, but I actually also want to just sit on the couch and relax. I know I should apologize, but my ego won't let me apologize because I don't really want it. I want it, but I don't want it. These two things in our brain are both us. They're not like good and evil on our shoulder. They're both pieces of our brain competing. And in fact, neuroscientists have been able to identify more or less the areas where that are at play when we have this kind of mental battle. The amygdala, which is sort of towards the back of our brain, and then the prefrontal cortex, which we've all heard about a million times, sort of separated humans from sort of our animal primates. And what's happening here is this: you've got your amygdala, which wants you to feel good now. It wants to feed you dopamine. It sees a cake and it says, eat it. More is always better than less, and now is always better than later, according to the amygdala. The prefrontal cortex, obviously higher order reasoning. This is where you see delayed gratification come in. This is where you see reasoning and consequence calculation coming into play. And when we say, I really want to go to the gym, but I also really don't, those are the two pieces are at play. And what interests me most about this like sort of battle of the two parts of the brain is that we already know the answer. We know we should listen to the prefrontal cortex. We know we should go to the gym. We know we should adhere to the diet that we don't want to adhere to. We know we should apologize for that thing we did that was stupid. And all we got to do is say the words. It's not a question of clarity. We already are clear. Do the thing. It's a question of conviction. Why aren't I doing the thing that I know I ought to do? And interestingly, what they kind of theorize is that because our amygdala is substantially older than our prefrontal cortex, the pull of the amygdala on your sort of psyche is much stronger. So what we're talking about here is like a 350 million year old part of the brain down all the way to reptiles. And then you've got the prefrontal cortex, which really didn't like separate humans from apes until 200,000 years ago. So when we look at an age perspective, it's like having an old friend and a new friend. Your new friend might be super smart, but your old friend, you've just been through so much together. It's so easy to listen to them. And so this is why we have this, what I call the battle of the mind, the sort of civil war in our brain. And there's a couple of things that I talk about to sort of help us understand how we can listen to the prefrontal cortex instead of the amygdala. I know that was a long answer there, but that's kind of what you reminded me of.
It's the adage of a jelly donut in my hand tastes good right now. 6-pack abs feels good after it sucks for the next 6 months. You get there.
Yeah.
right?
Same thing.
It really is that simple. We make this argument every time we make a decision of what feels good now, and things we really want all take delayed gratification. I mean,
Sure.
all the best things in life that we really, really aspire to are a delayed gratification. You've got to put in time, you got to put in effort, and it's down the road versus this feels really nice right now. And we're such a dopamine driven society at this point. It's become ridiculous. Guys, this is going to be an incredible conversation with Kirk. Stick around. We're going to go to our sponsors and we'll be right back with more.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our biggest 3-in-1 sale ever with a limited edition product, a back in stock special, and a closeout deal you won't find anywhere else. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get our MyPillow bed sheets only $29.88. Any color, any style, any size, even kings. Regular $119.98, only $29.88. Once they're gone for good. How about our My Towels? They're finally back in stock, but not for long. Get a 6-piece My Towel set, regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And for the first time and the only time ever, get our limited edition premium My Pillows. They're made with Giza cotton and designer gusset. Queen $17.98, Kings only $19.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get the best offers ever. Quantities are extremely limited, so order now.
The Driven to Thrive broadcast. Purpose, growth, and lasting impact for men. Helping men go from living to thriving. Purpose-filled, intentional lives.
Welcome to the Driven to Thrive broadcast, purpose, growth, and lasting impact for men. I'm your host, Brent Allen, and we help men go from living to thriving, purpose-filled, intentional lives. My guest today is Kirk Kappelhoff. Kirk, welcome to the Driven to Thrive broadcast.
Thanks so much for having me. Really happy to be here.
Now, Kirk, I'm not big in introductions, so in your own words today, who is Kirk Kappelhoff?
Sure. Well, it's been an evolving story. I was born in Abu Dhabi, grew up in Australia, stints in like Singapore, Scotland, but now obviously in the US. I'm actually sitting here in New York City today. How did I get here? I just wanted to play D1 sports, and you guys have the best world of combining athletics and academics, and I really wasn't sure which route I wanted to take yet. And so I came to the US. I was out in California. I made my way across the country to DC, Miami, now in New York, currently working in the world of finance, but interesting myself with the deeper questions. What makes a good man? How should a man be? Those sorts of things. And I think that's what we'll be talking about a little bit more today.
So you're a finance guy by day and a men's advocate by night?
Yeah. I would say that's pretty fair. Men's advocate might assume that I'm not also a woman's advocate, where I certainly don't want to neglect the incredible challenges that they've overcome since the dawn of time, but especially since the 70s and the progress they've made. And actually, that's one thing we can talk about, which is super interesting. What I've noticed, though, is at a macro level with men, what concerns me is not so much with how men are doing against women, but more so with how men are doing against previous generations of men. And on virtually every measurable factor, men are declining. And we're talking finances, spiritually, emotionally, vocationally, all these different features of what you might consider masculinity or what men want to achieve. There's been a decline, and it's very hard to find an incline. That interests me. Not so much from a perspective of needing to course correct ASAP at a macro level, but more at a micro level. How should I be so that I don't have to be a part of the decline, but instead be a part of the incline? Right? What are the things that I need to achieve and the things I need to do in life? Who's the person I need to be to see that growth?
So this journey into fascination with men started with your own personal growth. You looked at your life and went, who do I want to be? How do I want to be? Right? How do I want to live? And
100%.
Become even more so to the point where you're working on a book about the subject. And this is a fascinating question. I've been doing this podcast for, good Lord, this is season 6. We started in 2020. and I've done hundreds of shows, right? And we've been talking about masculinity in men for years now. And it is fascinating to me because, I mean, you read the stats, right? The average Gen Zer has a fraction of the testosterone that his grandfather had, which is just mind-blowing and terrifying to me at the same time, because I see the importance of masculinity in the world, right? And so we'll throw out the disclaimer right now so we don't deeply offend some women out there. I talk to men about men. That doesn't take anything away from women. I'm a girl dad. I got 2 daughters, my wife, and my mom lives with us. I got 4 women in my house.
Wow.
My life is surrounded by estrogen.
No wonder testosterone is declining.
Right? I get a kick out of it because my brother has 3 daughters and his wife, and it's like, wow, we just got a lot of women in our family. Like, I'm surrounded. I have so many nieces. I think I have 2 nephews. Otherwise, I have nieces. And so I'm utterly fascinated by women. I am the first one to say, I want my daughter to be able to do anything a guy can. I just don't want her to have to do anything a guy can.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want her to have to rely on a guy to do it for her. I want her to be capable, but I don't think she should have to do certain things. So when we talk about men, ladies, it's because I talk to men, right? We're not taking anything away from you guys. But I have seen this displacement because masculinity, just like femininity, is essential to the world thriving. And I've seen this deterioration. So I've been fascinated with this subject for several years now. I think you may be one of the few guys I've talked to who seems to be as fascinated with it as I am. Why do you think we are heading this direction? I know it takes a lot of work to start to put together a book. So I know you've done a lot of research. What are you seeing? Why do you think we started heading this direction?
Yeah, well, you're totally right, first of all, in saying that this started with sort of my journey. Once I realized that I don't really know what it means to truly like be a good man. I don't know what it entails. What's the checklist of things that I need to accomplish in order to be like a good man? Or what do I need to do in my day-to-day life? How should a man even be? Questioning this and then talking with other men about it, I realized this is a bigger problem to solve than I thought. And not many people had a pretty strong opinion, or at least what I would consider like strong, good answers on the topic. So I really delved deep into it. And what I found at a macro level is, like I mentioned before, things are declining. The question as to why, that's a bit deeper, and I can touch on that probably after we talk a little bit about the decline, because there's some interesting opinions from the experts on that. But basically what I did is said this, okay, well, every man faces challenges. What can I isolate these to? And I found 8, 4 internal, 4 external. The internal would be the mental, physical, emotional, and the spiritual. And these are things that you just can't avoid. You're going to have those. And I, of course, I define those in my own way. But then externally, you have these challenges as well, spiritually, financially, socially, vocationally. And you'll notice I split out vocationally or professionally from financially. And we can talk about that too. But across all 8 of those, first of all, women are doing incredible. If you take each of those from the 70s to today, women are just skyrocketing. They've increased pay. They've increased their physical strength. Emotionally, they're stronger than ever. There is a loneliness epidemic with them as well. But they are also like pressing into friendship stronger than men are. Occasionally, obviously, they're doing great. Relationally, they've always done great. So that wasn't too concerning. But then when you take a look at men against their grandfather's generation, let's say in the 70s, some interesting things arise. For example, like physically, only 15% of men were classified as obese in the 70s. Today, it's 40% of men. In fact, one proxy we use for strength with men is grip strength. If you have strong grip strength, you likely have stronger everything. And well, in 1972, that was 118 pounds, what men could hold. Today, it's 98 pounds. So there's been some sort of reduction there. Emotionally, men are feeling more lonely than they ever felt. In self-reported loneliness, men used to feel, 16% of men used to feel lonely, sometimes or always. Today it's 28%, so that means it's almost double. And then financially, this is very interesting. Wages peaked at a median level in 1969, 1970. Since then, there's been a $13,000 decline in median average purchasing power. So men are actually seeing about like a 28% reduction in their ability at a median level, which is just incredible. Socially, men have never been great. What experts are now calling sort of this friendship recession. 15% of men say they have no close friends. That was 3% in 1985. The number of men with 10 or more close friends has collapsed from 40% to 15%. Now, 10's a lot, but 40 to 15% tells you a lot about what's changing there. Interestingly, in that same year, 45% of young men reported that when facing like a personal problem of sorts, they would reach out to their friends first. But today that number is 22%. So it's less than half, from 45% to 22%. The question then arises, who are they reaching out to? Well, 36% say that their first call would be to their parents. Nothing wrong with that in and of itself. But when you pair it with this next statistic, that 35% of men today are now living with their parents, that's more than the number of men living with a partner or a wife, then it becomes a little bit more concerning, because now you're wondering, well, the reason that they're calling mom or dad is because they're living with mom or dad between the ages of 22 and 35. And I just see men reclining from society. Relationally, which is obviously quite important as well, 1 in 3 men haven't had sex in the last 12 months. That's shocking. In 2008, it was 10%. Now that number is up to 31%, which is not because men all of a sudden are screaming for celibacy. It's because they're not out there looking. Already in the dating field, men outnumber women on the apps 9-1. And according to the stats, 20% of men receive 80% of the likes, or swipes, I should say. And so you've got this very unbalanced view of what's happened between previous generations and today. But what's even more interesting is that while the bottom 90% of men have never had it worse, if you take a look at the bottom 90% of men across all previous generations, our bottom 90% is bad and it's getting worse. But on the flip side, that top 10% of men have never been more successful than the top 10% of men from previous generations. So this prompts the question. 1, how do I know if I'm in the top 10% or in the bottom 90%? And 2, what does it take to be in that top 10% versus 90%? I personally, if I had the choice, would want to live a life that is more in accordance with the 10%, whether that is socially and just having a rich friend and family group, or financially, or physically. And so this is what I'm trying to solve for. What is that blueprint that you need in order to more or less achieve something that would put you in the life that maximizes your potential, or with different potential? A person with a potential of, let's just say, an arbitrary number of 70, they can never live above 70, but they can live up to 70. And if you achieve 35, then you're living half of your life. Why not exceed it and do the best you can to live the full potential that you were actually born with? So at a high level, that lays out the problem. I certainly didn't answer the question as to why, which we can talk about, and there's some interesting pieces there. But I'd be really interested in your reaction to that. You said you're super interested in this topic. When you hear those things, like the 8 challenges, 4 internal, 4 external, anything jump out at you, that, or maybe anything that surprised you?
I won't say anything surprised me. So this podcast started with a book.
Okay.
I started exploring this problem years and years ago, and I've talked to a couple guys who frame it right. You have the 8 things. I've talked to guys who frame it in 6 things or whatever, right? I think all of us identify those 8 areas. I don't know that we all define them the same, but we all identify basically those 8 characteristic areas for men. I like the fact that you separated the financially from the vocationally, because we are so focused on the provision part, right? At a time when provision is actually less of a driver in relationships than it was for many generations. But the decline in men has been a fascination for several years now. I was watching, I don't know how much news you watch, I'm a news nerd. I listen to the news all day. I'm sure it's actually bad for my brain, but I listen to it all day. And I was laughing, totally, sidestepping politics, period, right? One of the mayoral candidates for, I believe it's New York. Is it New York or Chicago? Zoram Mandani.
Yeah, it's New York. That's right here.
He went to something that was going on in one of the areas, and he had to have help to bench press 135 pounds.
Yeah, I saw that. He was out of breath, and it was
the spotter was basically lifting it.
Was a lot of
right.
memes.
And I'm not going to rag on the guy. I don't want to get political or rag on the guy in this, but I looked at that and I thought, wow, that just seems like, and I've been a personal trainer for years. I understand weight really is relative to your size, right? 135 pounds is heavy to someone who is a whole lot smaller than I am.
Sure.
I get that. But in that, I was looking at some of that stuff with the statistics now that less than 10% of the men in the world can bench 225.
Right.
Which just floored me. As I've been lifting weights since I was 11 years old.
Wow.
Pretty religiously. I've been lifting weights since I was 11 years old. I tore out my shoulder and had to rebuild from scratch and get past that number again when I was already benching 3-something. I tore out my shoulder doing another exercise and I had to retrain from 0 all the way back up again, right? Which is pretty frustrating when you spend a long time trying to get to 315 and then you tear out your rotator cuff on something else.
Yeah.
But I saw
what you
right?
touch on is a really important point too, and that is like physically, what does it actually take to be in the top 10%? And there's answers, because out of all the things that I've mentioned, some of them are measurable, very measurable, like the physicality piece. And athletically, since only 8 to 10% of men have visible abs, a top 10% men will technically have visible abs. He'll also be able to hold an 8:30 mile pace for about 3 miles, right? That would put you in the top 10%. Not extremely fast, but definitely, quicker than you might expect.
Yeah, that would put you much higher than the top 10%.
Yeah, exactly. He'll be able to back squat 1.75 times his weight, deadlift 2.25 times his weight, and bench press 1.25 times his weight. Those are the things you would need physically in order to be in the top 10%. Now, there's a million other metrics that you could list off. But if we're talking about weight room, that's what the man would need to be able to achieve. Financially, there's another section. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Those metrics actually will put you in the top 1% of the world.
Yeah. That's
not even the top 10%. Those metrics actually put you in the top 1% in the world physically.
You're 100% right. If you take them together, they would 100% put you in the top 1% of individual people. And if you take it from a US perspective, those things would on average put you top 10%. What's interesting though is men might be able to do one of those, but not all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like, okay, now is that 10%? Is that 1%? Right? Those sorts of things.
But seeing that decline, right? And then a couple of years ago, one of the popular talk shows, the Gen Z talk shows on YouTube, it's a couple of young guys, all in their low 20s, had their testosterone checked, and they were all like, their great grandparents had more testosterone than they did. And I've seen this decline, right? Like you have. And so, yeah, I look at that and it's like, but part of that is we've also skewed what that actually looks like. There's this common misconception that among women, and I don't know if I want to blame social media for that men, good men who are good, all make over $100,000 a year.
Right.
And it's like, actually, that's less than 2% of men, period.
It's true. I think median wages right now, somewhere in the 40 range.
Oh, yeah. The amount of men who make over $70,000 a year by themselves is like 2% of men, maybe 3. But we all have this idea in our heads with social media, right? Because we all see our best moments on social media and go, oh, yeah, high caliber men all make this. I know a lot of really stellar guys, like high quality men. They are good men who take care of their families, are good fathers. They're doing their best to keep their health up. They make a good living. They don't reach that bar at all. Right. I've got a friend of mine who is a teacher, and he's worked for years to put himself through school. He's been a para for years in the school system while he was working on his teaching certification. And he's a phenomenal guy, right? One of the best guys I know. And he doesn't make anywhere near that. Sure. And so we've got this skewed perspective of what men look like today. And so now we're playing two games. We're playing, this is what men used to do, right? This is what our forefathers did, our grandfathers, right? In their generation, that how they provided, the money they brought in, the health, et cetera, et cetera. We're comparing that. We're also comparing these unrealistic expectations in our society of what social media says is. So yeah, it's this really complex game. And I think it's really contributing to the fact that men don't know what to do now, because like their traditional roles are gone. And now we have multiple measures. Like you said, you found what is this actual answer? How do we define men, masculinity, what they do?
Couldn't agree more. And you hit on some very interesting topics there. One of them, this is actually the reason that I separated out the financial challenge from the vocational/professional challenge. And that's because they don't have to be tied, first of all. But secondly, financially, men put a disproportionate importance on their salary and on their net worth. Women care less about, they don't tie their identity as much to net worth or salary, but men will take their number and they will isolate it at the core of their identity. And this isn't Kirk. This is the literature, the academic literature speaking here. Men report higher happiness in the exact same circumstances if they feel as if they're in a really good financial position, and they will borderline be depressed if the exact same circumstances are the same, but their financial dollar changes to something that they don't feel is sufficient. And this is obviously even truer still if you find men in, let's say, friendship groups where they are at the bottom of the pack, and then the comparison is at its highest. So that's something that needs to be addressed. Men thinking that this is their be all and end all. Well, according to at least my framework, there's 7 other sections that you need to focus on. And this is where we see this dilemma where you've got like this really fit guy in the gym, and you look at him and he walks in and everybody notices this guy walk in. He's massive and he's fit and he's shredded. And when he opens his bank account, he's got $2 in there, right? That is an example of the disproportionate attention on your life. There's more facets. Don't idolize just one piece. The alternative side of that is the guy who works in banking who never leaves his desk, consulting never leaves his desk, and he's eating out all the time, and he just let his health go to nothing, right? Well, there's no point having like a $10 million net worth if you're going to die at 50. And so this balance, actually, studies show when you are balanced across your life, you feel like everything is in order across your life within a threshold range, and everything is more or less in tandem, that leads to the highest reported number of happiness. Why? Because it's hard. And typically, and we can talk a little bit about the effect of doing hard things on your brain, but typically, when men do hard things, gratefulness increases, life satisfaction increases, the ability to report less likelihood of suicidal ideation. All those pieces go in the right direction, whether that's up or down. And so, in short, doing everything is a lot harder than just focusing on one thing. There's a time and a place to focus on one thing, 2 things, and you need to do that. But overall, in the long run, keeping things in balance, not just isolating for your finances or your friend group or how much you can back squat, that will lead to a longer term higher happiness. And so what I encourage people to do is take a look and self-reflect on these 8 sections and score yourself. And I have my own scoring framework in the book for where you can kind of say, okay, well, where am I at physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, vocationally, relationally? Where can I rate myself, and which one's lacking to the other ones? And what do I need to do in that particular one or two or three in order to hit parity with the rest?
I think you touched on some good stuff with the hard things there. I'm a big fan of concept because I think that's been part of the decline for men. And it's part of the reason that video games appeal to us so much, right? Men are by nature, it's in our DNA. We want to conquer. We want to discover new worlds. We want to cross the ocean. We want to climb the mountains, right? We want to do these big things. And we're in a generation where it feels like most of that's been done, right? There's no new worlds to explore. There's no unfound continents to chase, right? There's no, as the quote said earlier, great war, although the military guys would disagree with that. There's no great challenges ahead of men. And so men feel like they aren't accomplishing, they haven't learned to substitute that in. And so I think, pursuing the hard things idea, that's really important for men. We need to feel like we're on mission. We need to do things that challenge us both physically and mentally at the same time. And whether we want to admit it or not, emotionally and spiritually as well, we need that dragon to slay, for lack of a better term. And so I'm a huge fan of, pushing men to do that. When I started trying to come around in my life, right, I had given up construction after years of working in construction and stuff like that, and took a desk job. I got into IT, and I noticed me putting on a little extra weight around that midsection, right? No more abs, more time in a desk chair than actually physically doing anything. And so I actually started my own journey jumping into like obstacle course racing. That was what it's like.
Oh, cool.
Man, I want to do that kind of stuff again, right? Because I used to be able to do that kind of stuff. I want to do that kind of stuff again.
I'm imagining like some American Ninja Warrior stuff. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Tough Mudder, Spartan races, yeah, that kind of stuff.
Oh, cool. Yeah, very nice.
I have a Tough Mudder tattoo. Like,
wow, committed.
I started a friend who has become part of his identity. He's now recognized on social media for his Common Man OCR tag. I started his fascination with it. He was a friend. I was like, hey, let's go do this together, dude. I did this thing, and we were both desk jockeys. Like, let's go do this, right? And it's really become. He just got back from a 2-day, 3-race event down in SoCal, but chasing that for both of us, like, it changed us a lot. It helped us start to come back around on other parts of our lives where we felt like we were lacking. Awesome. By pursuing something difficult, something that challenged us physically, emotionally, mentally, because you get 10 miles into one of these things and your muscles are cramping and you're exhausted and everything hurts and you're dirty and you're wet and you're cold and you're like, this sucks. And then you see a smart little sign they like to put on the course that says, remember, you paid to do this.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, when you look at challenges, most people think of them as impediments to life. I'm living my life, I'm doing my thing, and then an obstacle comes in, which is challenging, and it gets in the way of my life. And Ryan Holiday, he writes a lot about stoicism, and one thing that he quotes Marcus Aurelius on is that the obstacle isn't in the way, the obstacle is the way. And when you challenge things in your life, when you go through those challenges, those things that feel like difficulty, they're the things that actually give you drive. And so in that view, challenges, therefore, are not an impediment to a rich life, but the building blocks for it. Show me a man who shortcuts life's difficulties, and I'll show you an apathetic man. That was one of his quotes. I love that one. And if you take a man and show me that he's one that doesn't complain, you'll probably find a man that's enthusiastic about life. You can just take it on. John Shedd, he was an author. He said, a ship is safe in its harbor, but that's not what it was built for. And so by the same token, we were not designed to sit in comfort. We were designed to pursue challenges. And the immense benefits on the brain are pretty evident there too. And we could talk about that, which is pretty awesome. But it's very interesting to me to see that, like, it's so easy for us to fall into that problem that in that book, Those Who Remain by G. Michael Hopp. Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. It's oversimplified, but it creates the picture that this is almost cyclical, right? When we find ourselves in comfort, part of it's systematic, but part of it comes down to agency. And by agency, I just mean it's us. We get to decide the type of life we want to live. Our biggest problem in life could be that our Starbucks latte is too cold if we design it that way. But it could also be that we take on responsibility, and responsibility has its challenges. And the more responsibility we take on, the more purpose we'll find we have. Jordan Peterson has this great quote. He says, your purpose in life is to find the biggest burden that you can bear and then bear it. And I love that because burdens come in all shapes and sizes. I don't want to say that like having a wife and kids are a burden, but in a sense, they're a responsibility, and responsibilities come with burdens. And so by taking those on, which is something that I think men should definitely pursue, it's something that turns selfishness into selflessness, because now you have to live for other people. Like taking on a job, which again turns your selfishness into selflessness. By volunteering at some sort of community outreach piece, turning selfishness into selflessness. This is where responsibility and therefore purpose seem to arrive. The more responsibility you have, the more purpose you have. And since they're challenging, the less you complain about life, the more enthusiastic you are for it. And so it seems to be this positive feedback loop where doing hard things makes doing hard things easier and makes you enjoy life more, because you know that you can feel very tangibly the difference between the best parts of life and the hardest parts of life.
Well, and that's self-evident to like anyone who spends a lot of time training in the gym, right? I'll throw that metaphor out there. When you first start going to the gym and are new to it, sometimes it's hard to get started, right? You got that struggle. And then you start lifting regularly, and yeah, it's difficult, but it becomes hard to not go lift, not go train regularly, because your body starts to crave that challenge. It starts to crave that work. And so, yeah, you do hard things and it makes doing hard things a little easier and a little easier. You're like, yeah, it's rough, right? How many guys do you know in the gym who are like, oh, I'm going to feel that tomorrow, and they're smiling as they say it, because it's like, you know, the first time I hit some of the numbers I wanted to hit, I was like, God, tomorrow's going to suck, but man, that was so cool, right? It's so stoked afterwards. Kirk, I want to pivot a little bit here, because I think you and I could talk about some of this stuff pretty much the rest of the day, honestly. But I want to pivot into a topic that I saw that you talked about that really I think is important for us to cover, because a lot of men are struggling with a loneliness epidemic. And that loneliness epidemic is thinning our numbers. Men are, the last statistic I read was suicide was the second leading cause in men from 18 to 35. And it's because men are lonely. And part of the reason we're going to games is there's community with games. I have friends who met, they were in the same guild, played in World of Warcraft. They're married and have kids. Been married for 15 years now. Yeah. You know, we crave a sense of community, but we're not good at getting it as men. Sure. And so we're facing this epidemic of loneliness where men, even in a crowded room, or even when surrounded by people they love, feel alone. Yeah. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're not wrong. The rate of suicide amongst men is 4 times that of women. They're very disproportionately affected. The rate is not only higher, but it's increasing. For example, if you were to take the rate of suicide on men from the year 2000 and just keep it steady, meaning it didn't increase to what it is today, then 400,000 more men would be alive in the US alone today. That's more than the number of men lost in World War II. Now, granted, it's over a longer time period, right? That'd be about 20 years as opposed to World War II 6. But even still, that's a lot of men. And it's because, like you said, they're feeling lonely. They're feeling purposeless. They don't feel like they have something to do. Now, part of that is the challenge, the problem of purpose. which is dealing with the 3 Ps that we spoke about, which is, the provider, procreator, these pieces right there. But the other side of it is socially. I mentioned before that 15% of men have no close friends. That used to be 3%. So that's increasing. The number of men with 10 or more close friends, that went from 40% back when your grandpa was in his 30s to 15% now that we are in our 30s, 40s, right? So this change is scary. You called it the loneliness epidemic. Other experts have called it the friendship recession. It's happening for women too, but nowhere near at the same rate as what it's occurring for men. Now, is this something that's out of our control? Certainly not. It's something that maybe socially is easier or more accepted for women. But this is where men need to step up and put on their big boy pants and just ask a guy, yo, want to hang out, right? There's this great saying that women bond face to face and men bond shoulder to shoulder. Women go get a cup of coffee and then they'll talk and all of a sudden they are best friends. Men could plow a field, not say a word to each other, but because they're shoulder to shoulder doing something together, now they're best friends, right? And that's not always true, but in general, that's what's true. You do things with men. So ask men to do things. I had a buddy here who he just asked me, and actually tonight we're doing this. He just, hey, you want to go play some ping pong at this local ping pong bar? So we're just going to show up late at night and slap ping pong balls around and chat for probably what will become hours. That is typically got a negative connotation with it, which is, should I ask to hang out? Is that uncool? Am I trying too hard? The answer is no. And you'll be rewarded. You're rewarding your future self if you make the move to just go ask and push this loneliness epidemic or friendship recession out. And so what typically happens is we think we're social because our wives and girlfriends invite us to things. And we're not going to hang out with our friends. We're going to hang out with their friends' husbands, right? That's what ends up happening. That is a trap to fall into that gives the illusion of taking control of your social life, when in reality, you need to have your own social life too. Your social life isn't, I show up to work and I see my friends there. Those are friends you made at work and you happen to see them, but what are you purposefully doing? Who are you purposefully FaceTiming once a week, maybe across the country or the world? Who are you purposefully going out and doing something with? Maybe you've got golf buddies. Maybe you go paintballing. Maybe you just catch up and watch movies. Whatever the case may be, there needs to be some action on that side from the men's side. And I'm talking pretty harshly about it, mainly because I'm a culprit of doing it the wrong way. I've definitely fallen into the trap where it's just so easy to let life and all the social people that might be there coincidentally fall into place. But who are the men that you would actually be friends with if all of those structures of work and church on Sunday and then whatever things that you do week to week, if those all fell, who would you love to keep in contact with? Make the effort to reach out to them. Just send them a text. They're going to say yes. They want to hang out with you, right? And even if they don't, there's somebody that will. The point is that we're missing that piece. So I don't know if that's similar to what you've seen or experienced or heard about this topic, but that's typically what I'm seeing in the statistics or frankly, just in my personal life.
Oh, we were talking before we started recording, right? And I told you an experience when I went over to have a cigar with one of my good friends, and we met because our wives are friends. That's how we met. On the happier note, we actually like totally hit it off, and we get along great. We're good buddies now. But like, I came over to hang out and to have a cigar. He's got 4 kids, so we were both very busy, and we don't get to hang out a whole lot. So we try and make it purposely, but it's like, maybe once a month if we're lucky. And we live a mile apart, right? His daughters gave us so much crap because I showed up to have a cigar with him. He's like, oh, Dad, your date's here.
Yeah.
Oh, they're so cute, right? Men have this weird stigma, so much so that like his younger 2 daughters are best friends with my daughters. Like our families are really, really deeply connected at this point. And they still tease us because it's so weird for Dad to hang out with somebody because Dad doesn't hang out with it. And that's the truth. Is my friend, that's one of the reasons we clicked, is neither of us are really good about hanging out with other guys or anyone for that. Mm-hmm. This is one of my big weaknesses as a man, is I have to be really conscious and intentional about hanging out with other people because I'm an introvert. Which is ironic since I do this for a living, but I'm an introvert. Hey, there's a reason I'm on this side of the screen, right?
You don't do these live.
Right? Yeah. No, I'm good one-on-one. I don't like groups. That really messes with me. But I would, like, my wife laughs because I'm a homebody. I would do nothing but hang out with my daughters and my wife. I'm that stereotypical comedy joke, sitcom joke of, you know, I'm the dad who never goes and hangs out with anybody. I don't want to see anybody. I go to work, I come home. I don't want anything else. I wouldn't be social if they didn't make me. And so I've had to be really conscious about it over the last several years, trying to correct that. So I know I need to be around other men. And so, you know, his daughters tease us because, like, oh my God, Dad Dave's here, right? Because neither of us go and hang out with other guys or anyone. And so while I've made a conscious choice about it the last several years, I've gotten involved with like men's Bible studies and a game night with some of the guys I know and stuff like that, trying to do things purposely. It's a really like forced thing for me. But it's because I'm aware that I need that. And I think a lot of men don't understand. Like, no, you need that. Your work buddies are work buddies. They're not friends. I think a lot of men don't understand. Like, you really, for you to thrive as a male, you need to be around other men because it raises your levels. You don't know what it does for you because at a point in history where we're more able to connect than any other time in history, we are less connected than we've ever been.
Right.
Like this is the surface level relationship right here. Hey, I'm talking to you on the other side of the computer, on the other side of the country, and yeah, we're connected. Yeah, I was social. Yay. And it's not real connection. I think we've lost understanding that somehow. I also think that a lot of it has to do with hustle culture.
Like never stop, constantly work.
Yeah, right. There's been a huge decline in men's mental health. And to me, like I'm looking at the evidence recently. I've been really studying this recently in the decline in men having actual hobbies, right? Our fathers and our grandfathers had hobbies. And men go, well, I have a hobby. No, you don't. If there's any ramifications of you not doing that thing, you lose income, you lose influence, right? If there's any penalty for you not doing it, it's no longer a hobby.
Sure. Yeah.
If it's feeding something, it's not other than I do this for fun. If it's like trying to make you an income or something like that, no, that's a side hustle. That's you trying it, but that's not a hobby. You're not doing it for the joy of it.
Right.
Because
like what would you do if you were the only person in the world that existed and money, resources, whatever wasn't an issue? That's a hobby. That's how you can define your hobby. Like, what would you? I'd go to the top of a building and hit golf balls. I'd probably revert back to video games, if I'm being honest, a little bit, if there was no responsibility whatsoever. But those are the things that your hobby. And you're right. So many people confuse a side gig because they, like you said, with hustle culture, they go, okay, well, this is my hobby. It can't be your hobby if, like you said, there's anything else that relies on it other than the pure joy of doing it. Meaning, if you lost the money, you would stop. If you lost the person doing it with you, then you'd stop, right? That's not a hobby then. And one of the things that I've seen a lot is people, when they go, let's say they start dating, they realize this really quickly because somebody asked them, so what do you do for fun? And they have nothing to say. I work and I really like Netflix, right? Like that's the answer. And maybe they go to the gym or something like that, but that's more for maintenance than it is
for health,
true joy. Exactly. So it's kind of like, okay, well, what are those pieces? And so this is why you can kind of pair a lot of the times your hobby with social. I might not go hit 100 golf balls at a driving range alone as frequently as I would go do 18 holes with the boys, right? Or I would probably not go to a comedy show alone, but last night I was at a comedy show in New York with my guy friend, right? And actually, to your point, one of the comedians, the heckling comedians, called us out and thought we were a gay couple. Why? Because it's just four lads, and we were sitting kind of 2 and 2, And they just made the assumption, right? These couldn't possibly be friends hanging out, male friends. That'd be
Right.
ridiculous, right? And so I couldn't agree more. Like investing in these things doesn't happen by accident. Everything that we want to improve in life usually comes purposefully. It doesn't happen accidentally. Maybe your growth as a human from a baby up until you're 25 years old, everything up to there is natural growth. You don't have to do anything. You're just developing. But from 25 on, you're decaying, and that is true of everything. That is true of your mind. That is true of your body. That is true of your hobbies. That is true of your social friendships. If you invest in something, it gets better. If you ignore it, you can't expect it to get better. It just won't happen. It's not accidental.
All right, Kirk, we got to pivot a little bit because
Sure.
we're going to run out of time on this thing if I'm not careful. And, you know, we've talked about several concerns among men at this point. We've talked about the decline in testosterone. We've talked about the stress of productivity life, of not having friends. We've talked about a lot of things. And there's honestly, like, that's why I'm still doing this 5 years into it. There's a lot of things to talk about in the world of men. We are simple in some ways. We are complex in others, right? Just like any other creature. But I really want to spend the last little bit talking about some solutions, because we can talk about problems, but that's not solving anything. So we're going to do the impossible. We're going to try and, you know, at least put some guys on the right foot and give them some steps to start moving towards some solutions in some of these things.
Ever wonder what really happens behind the mic? When the lights go off and the polished show ends, well, that's when the real story begins. Join us on Patreon and get access to our exclusive Patreon-only podcast, Behind Closed Mics, fallible and unfiltered. The messy, honest truth of growing as a man, husband, father, and content creator. No scripts, no polish, just the highs, lows, and chaos of running multiple podcasts. I'm up to 4. Coaching, building a brand, working freelance as a podcast producer and digital marketer, and showing up as a husband and dad all at the same time. Plus, you get insider content from all 3 of my public shows, unique community opportunities, and direct interaction with me, available at every level. If you love what we do, and you're the kind of person who wants to know how the sausage is made, that's your cup of tea, well, guys, then you want to see in the back room. Join us at patreon.com/thefallibleman today.
So what issue do we want to tackle? What are we going to solve today? World hunger? Oh, no, wait, we're talking about men. What are we going to solve?
So I would say this, when we're talking about the problems of masculinity, I've described a lot of statistics that take things at a macro level. Here, on average, are the problems that men are facing. Here's a decline from previous generations of men. Solving those at a macro level is a very different question than solving them at a micro level. For example, Richard Reeves, who identified a lot of those macro level trends, and I highly recommend his book Of Boys and Men, where he delves into that. He writes to policymakers and his recommendations. You know, since boys develop more slowly, start them in school a year later. Since today, we currently have more female fighter pilots in the U.S. Air Force than we do have male primary school teachers. We need to invest more and incentivize more men to become primary school teachers, because the studies show that boys respond better to male teachers than they do to female teachers, and that's not true of girls. Girls actually respond relatively equally to female and male teachers. They're more durable in that sense than boys are. So he makes these macro level recommendations. I read his book and I was completely convinced of his theses and topics, but that didn't help me with my day-to-day life. How do I, as a guy with these macro level trends and the bottom 90% and the top 10%, how do I live my life? What am I meant to change to ensure that I can maximize my potential now that I am a 30-year-old man, right? What do I do there? And that micro level solution is of a different nature and a different category. And what I did is separate it into these 8 parts, because I look at each of these challenges individually and I tackle them individually. At an overall level, the best thing that you can do to solve this is create systems. And systems are a powerful agent for you ensuring that you live your best life every day. What I do is, this started with me creating what's called a perfect day. A perfect day is, if I could live this day every day, what would I have to do for just that day at least to feel like I lived a perfect day? And so for me, I started writing this out, and it was, okay, wake up with a glass of lemon water. I know that's really good for you. Clears everything out. It's a great thing to do. Have a cup of coffee. Read 10 pages of my book. Go on a run. Hit all my work that I need to get done that day. Maybe do a lifting session in the evening. One thing I always struggled with was brushing my teeth twice per day. I'd always do it in the morning, but then at night I'd always forget and I'd just go to bed. But I know that's important, so I put that on my perfect day. And I realized, okay, I can live perfect days, but some things aren't meant to happen every day. Some things should be like 3 times a week. So I converted this to my perfect week. And now on a Monday, it might say something like, okay, I need to call a friend, right? I need to FaceTime a friend. I've got a couple in mind, like I'm from Australia, so I can call them, right? A couple across the country, I can call them, but I need to get in contact with them at least, like a Monday and a Friday. And perhaps I'm not going to learn a language every day, but I might study it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, something to that effect. And so this will change based off of my goals at the time. But the point is, I'm developing a system where I can look to it, and I've done the thinking ahead of time so that when I wake up that day, I don't need to do the thinking. I already know what I'm going to do. I can look at it the night before and say, okay, tomorrow morning, I'm waking up at 5, I'm going on a run, and then I'm coming back and I'm hitting some of my book, right? Whatever that might be. And this matters because somebody that reads 5 pages a day on average finishes 8 books a year. That's 8 books you wouldn't have touched had you not had the system in place. Somebody that goes to the gym 3 to 4 times per week puts on 10 to 15 pounds of muscle, especially if they're a beginner, per year, and burns an extra 4,000 calories per month, right? This systematic approach to life, it adds up. And so what I encourage men to do is create a system around what you would deem to be your perfect day. And don't hate yourself when you don't do it. I have designed many perfect days and perfect weeks, but I have never lived a perfect year. I even struggle to live a perfect month. There will be something that you'll inevitably miss, but that's okay, because I guarantee that you will complete more and achieve more in any given week because you tried to adhere to a system than you would if you didn't have a system at all. And so this is what I call out. Just design it. You don't even have to do it. Just design it. And then maybe you think about it a little bit more. And then maybe one of them becomes a habit after 21 days or so. And then maybe another one does. But over time, you will see results more than if you just didn't do this at all. So tangibly, practical steps, create a system for your life. I'm obviously creating quite a broad system across 8 different categories in the form of this book. Those are measurable. Those have steps. And the goal is I should be able to, if I do this and live this properly, have the conviction to do so, not only develop willpower to do it, but then use that willpower to sustain the other 8 challenges that I'm trying to achieve.
I like the concept because men are at their base creatures of habit. Men actually really tend to thrive when they have a routine. More so, it's funny because, there's obviously exceptions to every rule, right? There are people who are just thrive on chaos and are, fly by the seat of my pants. The majority of men, I hate to use generalizations, but the majority of men actually function best with a structured routine. And so the idea of planning it ahead of time, right? I think there's always value to that. And I'm big into block scheduling. That's part of the way I manage my schedule, my time. And I go farther to, like, I have one afternoon that is my daughter's time, period. From 4 o'clock until they go to bed, it's theirs. Nothing else in the world exists on that. I don't care. I don't answer calls. I don't do work. I don't do business. I don't pick up my phone. And so, I'm a big fan of putting things on the calendar that you wouldn't think about putting on the calendar necessarily.
Yeah.
And just blocking that out. So I love the idea that you put on, hey, I need to call my friend on this day, and I'm going to call this other friend on this day, and make sure I get those connections.
100%.
I love that because as men, we're done, right? You were talking about it, and I'm thinking, dude, I haven't called Oliver in months. What the hell? This is someone I love like a brother. I'm like, called him in months because we're both super busy guys, and we live on the opposite sides of the country and don't even think about it most of the time. It's like, damn it, I've really fallen behind. I haven't talked to him in months, and I should check in with him, right?
Sure.
We if you put it on your schedule and on your routine, that makes a whole lot more sense that we're going to remember those things. to do. So I'm loving the idea of a perfect day, starting a perfect day and then moving to a perfect week and playing out what that actually looks like. Right.
100%.
Obviously, you can revisit that. Do you revisit yours like quarterly or weekly, or how do you manage that?
Really good question. I don't have a strict cadence on it. I find some of them are lifetime items, right? Like if we're getting really specific, I am always going to get out of bed between 5 and 6 a.m., short of a big wedding the night before, or big party or something like that. That's 5 and 6 a.m. That's just kind of my zone. I'm most productive in the morning. Statistically, and whether people feel like it or not, everyone's best time is in the morning. In fact, we have our highest level of willpower in the morning. So I say, do your hardest things in the morning, which for me is reading. All my friends would describe me as a reader. They are wrong. I am not a reader. It takes every ounce of willpower in me in the morning, but I make it fun by how I have that glass of water. I put my creatine in it so that I'm getting my 5 milligrams. And then I sit down, press the coffee machine, and I have my coffee, which is the nectar of life. And then I read my book. And once I hit 10 pages, maybe I want to go further, but I force myself to get at least that. And I don't enjoy before it. Once I start, I don't mind it, right? I actually really like the learning and everything, but I know how important it is for me. And so I force that. Tangibly right now, FaceTime a friend, that's never going to disappear. I always am going to do that Monday, Wednesday, Friday-ish. FaceTime family is also pretty frequent because they're all back home in Australia. Writing, right, as I'm writing this book, writing 500 words, that's one thing that's going to disappear. After I finish writing the book and revisions and all these different pieces, that's not going to stay there forever. So I might take that off and fill it with something. Maybe I'm happy just leaving it off and having a bit more of a easier, perfect week. And another one that I have that kind of goes on and off is eating a home cooked meal. You're always going to cook healthier than you will eating out. And so the idea of having a home cooked meal is by default, you are eating healthier. You are, having less grease, less unneeded calories, and then bed by 10 p.m. Again, that's going to be pretty generic for me. And so things like that, those will be either a mix of forever items or things that change. But ultimately, what I'm trying to achieve is that truth that John C. Maxwell always talks about, where he says, we don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. Without a system in place, you could end up anywhere. And ideally, we'd just love to continuously hit our goals higher, higher, higher. But the truth is, we don't do that. What we do is we don't want to break promises to ourselves. So when we make a system and we see the structure and we love the organization and our brain's designed for hierarchy, and we look at that and we go, that's what I've said I'm going to do, so I'm going to do it, right? That is where we ultimately will see results. So design the system. The goals piece, we all know how hard it is to achieve those. The system piece makes it more structured, organized, and easier. As for reviewing it, when it feels like it needs to change, that's probably the best time to change it. And it's likely not going to change materially. It'll be one item removed here, one item added there, something to that effect.
Now, you break this into 4 major segments in the life. All of these things can be addressed with this idea of designing a perfect day and a perfect week. You can nurture all those areas. In your case, it sounds like you're trying to hit, all 8 every week and make sure you're nurturing those things. But as a guy who looks at those 4 pieces that we covered earlier, go ahead and say them again.
So it's so you got the 4 internal, which is the mental, emotional, spiritual, and the physical. And then the external challenges are the financial, vocational / professional, and then social and relational.
So as we're diving into those guys, right, you're going to have times where you're going to identify where you feel like you are in each one of those things and go, well, you know what, on the spiritual level, I feel like I'm really got this. And maybe vocationally, I've got a really great job right now. I feel like I could use some more work relationally, or physically, I probably should get back in the gym, sitting in the desk chairs, putting on a little too much weight, right? You can shift those things, but there are 8 areas of your life to tune into all the time and reevaluate periodically, right? Check in with yourself, because, I catchphrases, but, what's the one what can be measured can be improved?
Yeah. Anything can be measured can be improved. And that's actually a great call out for things that can't be measured. Do your best to make them measurable. Like We don't have an internal clock or an internal calculator for determining how many words we know in Spanish or Italian or French or whatever language we want to learn. But Duolingo has a clever way of gamifying language learning by making these little modules, and they give you an estimated percentage of how much you know. When we see progress, we are incentivized to keep going. Strava is good for running, right? They track a bunch of metrics, and you can actually see over time how many miles you're hitting per week. It's your average pace, all those different pieces. CrossFit has turned something that's relatively boring, Olympic weightlifting, into something more fun, which was the CrossFit Games. And the rise and decline and the injury, all that aside, no one can deny their popularity and how they now all of a sudden everybody knows what a clean and jerk is when no one would know what that was before. Gamifying, meaning turning something that's unmeasurable into a measurable item, it works. And so take those things in your life and make them more measurable.
I laugh because Duolingo will also guilt you if you don't stay on top of it. Not only do they gamify it, like Duolingo will guilt the crap out of you if you neglect your language lessons. It blows my mind. I was studying for a trip I was planning to take, so I was trying to, learn some basic French, right? I knew I couldn't learn a bunch of, like, I wasn't going to become fluent, but I was like, okay, I at least want to, be respectful enough to try and have some basic phrases and be able to please and thank yous. I was raised Southern, so I have this very polite streak of please and thank yous and sir and ma'am, and, basic things like, excuse me, where's the bathroom? Important phrases when you're in other countries. I stopped doing it because the trip got canceled, and like the little app, the face changes on the stupid little app on your phone.
Right.
To show you that you're neglecting it and send you like guilting emails. Hey, it's been a while. Obviously you don't love me anymore. Like it escalates. I was like, wow, not only do they gamify learning a language, which was a brilliant idea, but they also like figured out how to build guilt into not using this app.
Oh, it's incredible. And they try to hide behind it because they have Duo, the little bird, which is super cute. So if anybody else said these things to me, I wouldn't let it stand. But because Duo is so cute, you actually do feel guilted. And so you have to go into the app and do something about it. I broke my streak a long time ago.
Oh, yeah. Finally, and the app face looks like a dead bird.
Yeah.
It's got like X's on the eyes and the tongue sticking out. It's like, really? Even the little app display changes on my phone to show you I'm not doing my Duolingo?
Yeah, I'm very impressed by some of the marketing teams out there. Duolingo is one. I don't know if you've seen the ones for Ryanair. Have you seen those ones?
No.
Ryanair is a very popular budget airline in Europe, and they totally embrace their cheapness. And so you can imagine when people are like posting on their story, like, thanks Ryanair, and they look at their window and there's just no window, it's just a wall. They'll respond back and say something like, hey, you paid for it. Like, we charge €9, like, suck it up. And so they'll do things like this, like for honeymoons, they'll call those people out. They've done very well. And I think they have more followers than most accounts on Instagram, Twitter, these sorts of things.
Oh, yeah. There's one of the fast food joints has gotten really big on X about just like talking trash about other restaurants and stuff like that. I was like, wow, I never thought I would follow a fast food restaurant's account, but we all like funny. Those little.
Yeah, Wendy's, I think, is the big one.
Yeah, they've gotten pretty. It's like, oh wow, you're not quite Elon Musk level troll, but you're growing pretty well there.
And there's a person behind that who's running the show as well.
Oh yeah, and the fact that they found somebody to do it that well is like, that's corporate was smart with that one. This is a good angle for you guys.
100%.
Kirk, like I really feel like this is such an incomplete conversation. I feel like we could go for several more hours.
Definitely could.
But we won't. Guys, let us know if we need to do a part 2 and carry on this conversation farther. Ping me, message me, whatever, harass Kirk. Let one of us know and we'll go on if we need to go on another show. Kirk, where is the best place for people to connect with you?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on Instagram. It's just my name, Kirk Kappelhoff. It's like Captain Kirk in Star Trek, and then Capelhoff is with the K and spelled exactly how it sounds. I'm sure it'll be in the notes here. You can also I talk about all this stuff on my YouTube channel, and so definitely go there and take a subscribe if this sort of thing interests you. You'll also get to keep up to date with how that book is progressing and when that's coming. And then, of course, if you do need to email me, which I actually love because I love hearing people's stories with their challenges of masculinity, or frankly, with what they're observing. And you'd be surprised how many mothers are reaching out to me about their boys and their concern for them and what either society is throwing at them or what they're going through. So that's definitely an option as well. And that's just kirkkappelhoff@gmail.com. Everything's just my name because it's a very unique name. No one's got that name, so I don't have to describe it at all. So that would be the main ways. And I really encourage people to reach out. I get back to literally everybody. I'm sure there'll come a day where that is not feasible, but right now that's very feasible. So please share anything you can with me. And yes, of course, we need to touch on the other 6 sections in detail, and I will gladly come back for a part 2.
And guys, of course, we'll have all of Kirk's connection points down in the show notes or the YouTube description, wherever you are finding this episode. We'll have all of his connection points to make sure you can reach him as well. Kirk, let's land this plane. If the men listening heard nothing else today, what do you want them?
Okay. A good quote by Jim Rohn. He said, "You can't change your destination overnight, but you can change your direction overnight." Ultimately, you are in charge of your life, and you are not going to make changes today that will change your destination when you wake up tomorrow. It's just not going to happen. But you can make changes today that will turn where you're facing from wherever you think your life will end you up to where you want to be. And with the mix of systems, with the mix of community, focusing on the things we've spoken about today, all of that's possible. So if a man is feeling like perhaps he's in that 90% and not in the 10, but wants to be in that 10, there are things that you can do to get there. And the changes can be so immediate such that you stop walking down that road and start walking down this one. To the men that already feel that they are in that top 10%, which is awesome, congratulations to you, there's ways you can give back. You are a perfect example when it comes to the dads. Look after your family, right? That's the number one thing. The biggest contributor to suicidal ideation, to men feeling purposeless, to not contributing back to society is not having a male role model. So the men that already are male role model and they have that built in, great, keep doing that. To the men that don't have kids, right? I don't have kids, right? What can we do? Big brothers, big sisters clubs, volunteering at those. There's one here in New York, which is awesome. That is a ginormous impact on, of course, the kid's life, but there has a ripple effect, of course, through the families and whatnot. And as much as you might say, well, I don't know if I'm a great role model, all the studies say that a role model is better than no role model. And there's just something about accountability, keeping it in check, and just knowing somebody's there watching, maybe going to ask about it, that changes your life. And so I would say to the men that feel like in the bottom 90%, there's a lot of time and there's still hope. And to the men that already feel like they're in the 10%, keep giving back. And there's a couple of ways to do it.
Guys, for Kirk and myself, thanks for hanging out with us today. Be better tomorrow because of what you do today. And we'll see you on the next one.
The Driven to Thrive broadcast. Purpose, growth, and lasting impact for men. Helping men go from living to thriving, purpose-filled, intentional lives.